Me and Juan. When I woke up, the story was almost over. As a vicious female supporting role, I was drugged and framed. I rolled with the male second on a rainy night. And there was a little life in my belly. The male and female protagonists overcame the many obstacles of their families and held a grand wedding. One in this novel of a domineering boss with a full 3.0 chapters. Only the last 3 chapters are about me and the male second. The forbearing, cold and taciturn male second was defiled by me. The vicious female supporting role. Although he didn't like me. Because of the little life in my belly. He could only bury all his feelings for the female lead in his heart and compromise with me. He had just started a business and was short of money. But I still bought all kinds of luxury bags. I even kept threatening him with the child in my belly. Not allowing him to have any contact with the female lead. This made him live on the edge of pain and collapse every day. I don't know if it was at the end that the author felt sorry for Ethan. At the end of the novel. She used a sloppy car accident to kill me. When the subsequent plot poured into my mind. I had just finished taking a shower and lying on the bed. This was the first day of my marriage with Ethan. So I was not worried. There was still time to change the ending. My marriage with Ethan started very bloody. On the wedding night of the hero and heroine. Someone put drugs in my cup. When my mind was groggy. I was helped to a room by the waiter. There was a micro camera hidden in it. And the ambiguity and beauty in the room were projected on the screen of the wedding hall. Although the picture was quickly cut off after just 2 seconds. But the rumors still spread everywhere. I lost my innocence. And I lost the value of marriage. My father found Ethan and coerced him to take responsibility for me. He lied that I was pregnant with his child. Trying to kidnap him morally. In fact, the child was really there. But I didn't dare to tell him. I touched my still flat belly and got up. The rental house, which was not big to begin with, was filled with bags and clothes that I moved in. Although many of the things were unnecessary. But Ethan said nothing, and helped me pack them all into the room. He calmly added me to his life. There was no indifference, no targeting, and no warnings. This was a little different from the original novel. This, perhaps, was him hiding his pain in the dark. 1 bedroom and 1 living room. It was a bit messy. But the bright yellow wallpaper, dimmed by the light, added a lot of warmth. Ethan had just finished taking a shower. His black hair was slightly wet. And he was hanging clothes by the window. It was dark outside. And the lights of the city in the distance were bright and brilliant. The translucent lavender suspender skirt was close to his underwear. Swaying in the wind. Which was heart-pounding. After he hung up the clothes. He turned around and saw me standing at the door of the bedroom. Ethan, let's sleep in separate rooms. I thought about it again and again. And finally spoke. As long as I keep a distance from him. Do not interfere with all his choices. And do not force him. Then Ethan will not feel pain. If Ethan is not in pain. Then my final ending will not be so tragic. He didn't like me in the first place. Just when I thought he would agree to my suggestion without hesitation. He said, there is only 1 room. What about the sofa? What do you think? He asked back calmly. The worn-out sofa is really small. And I guess I can't even lie down on it. So, I shut up. I always feel that I seem to have known Ethan before. But when I try to think about it, I can't remember anything. I don't remember having any deep interactions with him when I was chasing the male protagonist. He is at most a stranger who has met a few times in my eyes. Feeling. But when I woke up that day, I saw him for the first time. But I felt a sense of overwhelming familiarity, and a kind of palpitations of reunion after a long absence. It's a really strange feeling. Just as I was lying on the bed, swiping my phone bored lie. A glass of milk was handed to me. Drinking milk before going to bed is a habit I have had since I was a child. But how did he know? It was even more strange. Just heat it up. Oh. I sat up on my knees and drank the milk in small sips. Halfway through, I suddenly thought that I had to make 3 rules with him before he hated me so much. Ethan. There's something. What? There was a small dent on the side of the bed. He lifted the thin quilt and sat on it. I looked at him solemnly and said, "That's right. When we are outside. No matter how much you hate me. Don't show it first. And don't make me lose face. I know you don't want to get married. After this period of time, we will quietly divorce." He looked at me calmly and said nothing. The character of a willful, arrogant, and face-saving rich girl has been integrated into my blood. After saying that, I added, "By the way, I don't like Selena. Don't go see her. Otherwise I will be disgusted to death. My magnetic field is really repelling with the heroine. No matter what. I can't stand it. Someone who is on the same household registration book with me is being nice to her under my nose." Ethan looked at me, slowly lowered his eyes, and replied, "Yeah." I breathed a sigh of relief, and my mood became uncontrollably happy. It seems that Ethan is a person who is easy to talk to. I can't finish the milk. Just as I leaned over half of my body, and wanted to put the remaining half cup of milk on the table, he grabbed my wrist. The man's joints are clear, and his palms are warm. I raised my eyes and was slightly stunned. His eyes stopped on my face for a moment, and his Adam's apple rolled slightly. Then he lowered his head slightly, moved closer, and his pale lips touched the mark of the cup. He took my hand and slowly drank the remaining milk. Intimate and natural behavior. The place where the wrists were held was faintly hot. That familiar feeling came again. I suddenly said, "Ethan, did we know each other before? What do you think?" He put the cup back on the table and asked me. A light of the desk lamp fell on him, and the only sound in the quiet room was the ticking of the wall clock. As we looked at each other, his eyes gradually became hotter. I had a boyfriend in college. He was a poor student. Not only did he have to work part-time every day to pay off his debts, but he was also dull and didn't like to talk. No matter which aspect. He didn't look like someone I would like. And I really just wanted to play around. Because I heard from others that this boy likes Selena. I have money, beauty and family background. But I still can't compare to Selena. The little white flower. In the eyes of the male protagonist. So, I decided to win this boy to prove that it was the male protagonist who was blind to fall in love with Selena. Any normal boy would know to choose me. So, I took out a lot of enthusiasm to pursue this boy. Every day I would cross half of the campus to find him in their department. I accompanied him to class, study with him, and eat lunch with him. After 2 weeks of pestering him, his attitude was still indifferent. Until the group of debt collectors came to him. His gambler father died of alcoholism, and all the debts fell on him alone. That day I went to find him, and happened to meet the group of debt collectors. They held sticks, spoke harshly, and forced Ethan into a corner. A debt of more than 1 million can crush a teenager who is studying. But to me, this is just a bag of money. I directly threw out a bank card. The burden of life was suddenly lifted. The boy was stunned in place. His eyes red. And after a while, hot tears rolled down. 2 days later, he asked me for my bank card number and said that he would definitely pay me back when he had money in the future. I didn't care much. Everything went so smoothly afterwards. The boy let down all his defenses against me. As long as I was with him, I didn't need to do intimate things like holding hands and hugging. He seemed to be cold and self-restrained, but he always liked to pull me. In the empty corridors and remote corners of the campus, holding my thin waist, lowering his head and kissing me again and again. There was even one time, in an empty classroom, he kissed me to the point of losing control, and his hands were so strong that he seemed to want to rub me into his body. This scene was also photographed and posted on the school's confession wall. The comment area was full of excitement. But not long after, I proposed a breakup. Things that are too easy to get are really meaningless to me. In addition, The relationship between the male protagonist and Selena seemed to be one step closer. So I had to go and destroy it quickly. On that hot afternoon, he pursed his lips silently, staring at me stubbornly and unblinking lie. For a long time, he repeatedly confirmed what I said from my face. The summer breeze wrapped in heat waves blew through the treetops, and the noisy cicadas seemed to become background sound. The ice cream in his hand was originally meant to be bought for me. But now, it slowly melted in his hands. The white cream dripped down the cone, one after another, unable to be retained. I probably said some very hurtful words in the end. He stood there blankly, watching me leave. There was no quarrel, no questioning, and no entanglement. After a brief encounter, we returned to our respective lives. Later, when I occasionally thought of this relationship, I could only vaguely remember it. I couldn't remember the name and appearance of this boy at all. But after all, it was all in the past. For so long, I didn't have the idea of checking it out. Moreover, this relationship was less than 3 chapters in the novel. There was really no need to remember it. But now, I seemed to see the boy from that summer in Ethan's eyes. For in order to verify this fact, I added it back to the school's confession wall. But after a whole morning, I couldn't find the video of the kiss that year. I lay on the bed, looking at the white ceiling, feeling a little lost. So, was that boy back then just a passerby who would disappear after completing his mission? I thought about it for a long time, and didn't get up until noon. There was a message from Ethan in the morning on my phone. Breakfast is kept warm in the rice cooker. Remember to eat it when you wake up. Some of your clothes are in the small compartment. Call me if you can't find them. There is no doubt that Ethan cares about me. The wardrobe, shoe cabinet and dressing table in the house are all newly bought. And the air conditioner is also newly installed. And the bed is newly replaced. These are not written in the original plot at all. The only reasonable explanation is that the boy back then was Ethan. 5. The bar was bustling and noisy. My good friend Luna burst out laughing after hearing what I said. Miss, is it possible that he is just because of the baby in your belly? You are pregnant with his child. Shouldn't he be nice to you? What's there to be entangled about? I put forward my idea again, but he really looks like the boyfriend I dated in college. Impossible, Luna said firmly. Although I don't remember your boyfriend. It is definitely not Ethan. Ethan was a big shot in the finance department in college. If you dated such a powerful person, how could I not remember it? Besides, your 2 majors are in the 2 farthest corners of the school. So there is no chance to meet. Right? Besides, you were such a scumbag back then. If Ethan was that boy, he would definitely take revenge on you. How could he be so nice to you? I retorted, dissatisfied lie. Who is a scumbag? I only dated him and only kissed him. Luna sneered. I lowered my head to send messages to other friends. The results were no exception. All my friends remember that I was in love. But no one remembers the boy's name and appearance. I closed my eyes and let out a long breath. This matter is so confusing. In the face of difficulties, my efforts are shit. Okay, miss, why do you keep tangling about this? If you have time, why don't you check who put the drug in your cup? I can't find it. I collapsed on the sofa in despair. I give up. You must be the first to suspect Selena in this matter. I looked at the bright and chaotic lights above my head and said nothing. Now Selena is not only the wife of the CEO male protagonist, but also the white moonlight that the male second Ethan loves but cannot get. If I dare to do it, these 2 will strangle me to death in minutes. Forget it. It doesn't matter. Love is what it is. I thought through all the pros and cons in just 1 minute. 6. The heavy rain continued until 10 o'clock in the evening. Under the raging wind, the city was dazzling because of the chaos and night. I was eating fruit while watching the male model dancing. My phone rang twice. And Ethan sent me a message. Where are you? At a bar with friends. Are you coming to pick me up? I typed 2 lines and sent them over. This is part of my life. So I don't shy away from it. Address. I sent the location. Then, I added an emoticon. Thank you, husband. Muha muha. The music in the box just came to an end, and the boy danced to sweat all over his body. His eyes fell on me. I gave him a thumbs up without hesitation. I picked up my bag and said hello to Luna. I'm leaving first. Miss Chen, remember to pay the bill. Just after taking 2 steps, my wrist was grabbed from behind. It's raining so hard outside. Sister, don't you want to play again? The boy with clear eyebrows curved his lips and smiled at me obediently. But his fingers silently hooked my palm. Luna on the side laughed. Miss, don't hurt my feelings. Harry always looks forward to your coming. Don't try that. I broke free from his hand. Seeing that I really wanted to leave, the boy no longer insisted. I'll take my sister there. This place is a long way from the outside. And the car can't get in. Okay. It just so happened that I didn't bring an umbrella when I went out. 7 He and I walked out one after the other. Why didn't my sister come to play recently? Something happened. I may not come often in the future. Why? I thought about it. I always feel a little bad to come to this kind of place after getting married. Are you married? The boy suddenly grabbed my hand, his pupils full of disbelief. As soon as the voice fell, I saw a man standing at the door of the bar, wearing a simple white shirt and black pants, holding a somewhat worn umbrella in his hand. Half of his body was hidden in the darkness, cold and indifferent. When he saw the hands of me and the people around me clasped together, his eyes were calm. But his Adam's apple rolled slightly, the hand holding the umbrella tight and unconsciously, and the cold white back of the hand was bulging. But he said nothing. Just opened the umbrella. Half of the umbrella was exposed in the rain. He looked at me sideways and said lightly, "Let's go, sister." My wrist was held again. The boy's eyes passed over me and fell on Ethan, full of disdain. Such a heavy rain. His umbrella can't stop it. Let me take you there. He hooked his lips at Ethan, silently provoking. Sister has been here for 2 years. And I am the one she likes the most. And this little thing still makes me. Before he finished speaking, Ethan interrupted in a light voice. Don't bother. He walked over directly, put his arm around my waist, and brought me to his side. I struggled a little. The hand on my side suddenly tightened. The man's breath was calm and cold, silently declaring sovereignty. When I got home, I immediately fell on the sofa. Ethan bent down to pick up the high heels I kicked off and put them neatly, then went into the kitchen. After a while, he brought me a small bowl of hangover soup. I lifted my eyelids and took a look at the bowl of medicine, then buried my head in the sofa, and said lazily, I didn't drink alcohol. I drank soda. The rain outside made the windows bang, which made me sleepy. I yawned and adjusted my posture. My sleepy brain gradually became drowsy. Ethan stood there quietly and looked at me. I don't know how long it took before he whispered, Who is he? The deafening thunder swallowed up his tiny question. Lightning shone through the glass window, illuminating half of his face. He slowly squatted down, and his fingers trembled lightly, touching my eyebrows. His eyes, which were always calm, now revealed deep attachment and longing. Like that? He lowered his eyes. Juan, what should I do? The second half of the sentence was hoarse, as if he was mumbling to himself. The sound of rain outside continued, and the only thing that responded to him in the room was the long breathing of the person in front of him. 9 When I woke up in the morning, I found that I was still wearing the suspender dress from last night. Oh my God. I didn't take a shower. Ethan was setting up breakfast in the living room. I rushed over to him and asked, Why didn't you give me a shower? You fell asleep. He didn't even raise his eyes. And his reaction was flat. Then can't you help me wash? I have to change clothes even if I don't wash. I was going crazy. How could there be such a cold husband? I've already slept. Why can't he even help me take a shower? He glanced at me, then reached out, hooked his index finger on my slip suspender, and pulled it back to hang me. Okay. Well, I'll know later. I went back to the bedroom weakly, lay back on the bed, and then remembered something and reached out to touch my face. Take it off, Ethan said, standing at the door. I touched my eyelids and took off the double eyelid stickers. It's quite meticulous. There's something. My mom is moving in with us. Your mom is not with someone else. Before I finished speaking, I realized it myself. That boy back then. His father was an alcoholic and in debt. And his mother ran away with someone else when he was very young. I mistook Ethan for that boy again. I exhaled and reminded myself again. Ethan is Ethan. He is him. And Ethan is not him. Before I finished brainwashing myself, I heard Ethan say, she ran away with someone else when I was very young. And now her husband has passed away. So she can only come to me for help. Me? Ethan cleaned up the small compartment. The old lady moved in with her 2 big bags of luggage. I moved all my clothes back to the bedroom. Although the closet was full, Ethan never asked me to throw it away. It was the old lady who started to point fingers first. The sarcastic accusations and complaints came straight to me. She said I was a spendthrift and willful, and bought so many clothes. She said I was pregnant and still put on makeup before going out, which was not a good thing. After living there for 2 days, she found that Ethan made breakfast every day at home, and my underwear was also washed by Ethan. Her resentment became even heavier. I really don't know what sin my son has committed to marry a daughter-in-law like you, who doesn't know how to respect her parents-in-law, doesn't do housework, and can't be told or scolded. I listened to her endless complaints and finally couldn't stand it. She immediately put on high heels, carried her bag and went out, throwing a sentence, okay. Have an abortion right away. Divorce after the abortion. And let your son find another one. Pulse. Her voice immediately rose, and her expression was a little flustered. You dare. This is the blood of the Z family. See if I dare. I never suffer this grievance. I stopped a taxi downstairs and rushed to the direction of the hospital immediately. 11 I had an appointment for a prenatal checkup today. When I came out of the hospital, the old lady was trembling on the bus. As soon as she saw the report in my hand, tears started to flow down her face. She immediately sat on the ground and cried. How can you be so cruel? My grandson. What have I done to deserve a daughter-in-law like you? The old lady cried so loudly that many passers-by stopped. Grandma. What's wrong? I saw a familiar figure in the crowd of people watching the excitement. She was wearing a white dress, no makeup, and a person who looked like an Annie was following her. She asked in confusion. But her eyes looked at me, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. Hearing her ask this, the old lady howled even louder. She began to talk about how miserable her fate was. Her husband died, and she could only live in her son's house. Her son ignored her every day, and her daughter-in-law gave her a cold face every day, and didn't let her eat at the table. People gradually began to sympathize with the old lady, and many people were indignant and looked at me with disgust and contempt. Sister, Grandma is so pitiful. You, as a daughter-in-law, should be filial to her. Selena smiled and began to stir up trouble. I looked at her, said nothing, and turned around to leave. As a result, my wrist was grabbed from behind. A middle-aged man said indignantly, Why leave? You are so arrogant to bully an old man like this on weekdays. What do you believe in what she said? I couldn't help it after all. She abandoned her 7-year-old son and ignored him, and suddenly came to her son after 20 years. You are talking nonsense. The old lady interrupted me hurriedly, and then she started to wail again. The voices of the people accusing me became louder, and the vicious curses entered my ears one by one. Selena stood there and admired my unbearableness with a smile. Since marrying into the Gu family, She is no longer the weak little white flower she used to be. I looked around and felt powerless for the first time. 12. The farce ended with Ethan's appearance. The old lady was sent to a taxi. And the crowd dispersed automatically. When Selena left, she still cared about Ethan and asked him if he was doing well. Ethan just replied lightly, "Don't bother with your concern." At this time, the sunset in the sky just fell into the horizon, and the white birds in the distance circled in the sky. I sat on the bench and stared at the red sky in a daze. The afterglow falling on me was suddenly blocked, and a tall shadow enveloped me. Ethan looked at me with his eyelids drooping, his eyes calm and indifferent. I looked at him stubbornly without moving. It was a stalemate for a long time. He sighed and reached out to pull me. Unfortunately, he didn't pull me. I looked at him and blinked. Tears fell. He was stunned for a moment. "Ethan." Although I tried hard to hold it back, there was still a hint of crying in my voice. His calm eyes were broken in an instant, and a trace of panic flashed in them. He moved his fingers slightly and raised his hand helplessly. As soon as his fingertips touched my skin, I turned my head away. "Divorce." Ethan. The hot evening wind carried these very light words into his ears. His eyes instantly turned red, but he still stared at me stubbornly without blinking. I pushed him away, wiped my tears, and got up to leave. The cicadas on the sycamore tree were chirping. Everything seemed to be repeating the same as it was back then. The old lady was sent to a nursing home that day. Although she cried and made a fuss, Ethan was not moved at all. In the evening, when I was packing up, I found a postcard from a few years ago in the drawer. There was a simple sketch of a rabbit on it. The breasticles were loose and soft, and I recognized it at a glance. It was drawn by me. Next to the rabbit was written, "Happy Chinese Valentine's Day." I was quiet for a while, and a message came on my phone. The account that deposited money into my card every month was checked. The payee was Ethan. I don't usually use this card, so I didn't pay attention to it. Now there are a total of 620. Sorrow. I looked at the deep night outside and let out a long breath. In fact, I was not surprised. Before this, there were too many signs that he was the boy of the year. I said divorce on purpose in the afternoon. I want to take off his calm, indifferent disguise as soon as possible. 14. Ethan came back late at night. He drank. His clothes were messy, and he looked a little embarrassed. He turned on the light in the entrance hall, and when he saw me, he was stunned. Gradually, his eyes became darker and he stared at me without blinking. I sighed. Being drunk like this, it seems that we can't chat tonight. Juan. He stumbled towards me. His eyes were red and his voice was trembling. He leaned over and hugged me tightly and kissed me hard. As before, he liked to confirm my existence with extreme physical intimacy. The moonlight outside was bright, and the only sounds left in the quiet space were his heavy breathing and kissing. The smell of alcohol lingering around my nose seemed to make me drunk. I let him toss and turn for a long time, and then I slowly pushed him away and coaxed him to sit on the sofa. When I brought the hangover soup out of the kitchen, he was still sitting with his head down, motionless. When he saw me coming, he slowly raised his head, his eyes a little distracted. I saw a ring on his ring finger and asked curiously, "What is this?" "When we got married, we only got the certificate. This is a ring, so I can tell others outside that I'm married." He looked at the ring on his hand with me, and then raised his head to look at me. "Do you like it?" I nodded. "Oh, it's okay." He lowered his head, slowly began to take off the ring, and then handed it to me. I took it and looked at it. The pattern looked like it was printed on the stall outside. "Okay. Keep it and drink the hangover soup." My hand raised and lowered, and Ethan's eyes followed me. The ring slipped into his pocket, and he dropped his eyes blankly. He seemed very drunk, and after a moment he asked softly, "Don't you want it any more?" My heart softened inexplicably, and I squatted down and looked into his eyes. "Ethan, who am I?" He looked at me for a moment. The corners of his mouth slowly curved. And he lowered his head and kissed my eyes. Juan Juan. I turned on my phone and pressed the record button. Do you like Juan Juan? I like it. Okay. Recorded. I put away my phone with satisfaction. Then held his face and asked, "Why are you so cold to Juan Juan?" He blinked slowly, as if he didn't understand what I said. Do you know that I was bullied this afternoon? But you were still so calm? Why didn't you hug me, kiss me, or comfort me? Don't you like me? I do. The next second, his eyes dimmed again. But I'm afraid. What are you afraid of? I'm afraid that you won't cherish me if you get me too easily. He raised his eyes. The corners of his eyes were still red, staring at me without blinking, his eyes revealing indescribable attachment and deep fear. Through the layer of water light, I seemed to see the boy who was left there that summer. My heart trembled. I opened my mouth, but didn't know what to say. After a while, I whispered, "I'm not that kind of person." You are. Even when he was so drunk, he didn't forget to refute me. It can be imagined that the image of me as a scumbag who abandoned me after having sex has been deeply rooted in him. But the next second, he leaned over and hugged me again, rubbing my neck affectionately with his hot cheeks, and whispered sincerely, "But I love you. Even if I know you are like this, I still love you." Only one light in the living room was on, and the bright moonlight outside spread into the house. The young man on the sofa was confessing to his lover under the influence of drunkenness. At this moment, the barren and sincere heart of my youth finally had a home. 15 I set the alarm clock for 8 o'clock in the morning, wanting to let him hear my drunken confession. But Ethan actually got up earlier than I thought. When I got up, he had already gone to work. After breakfast, I started painting. I occasionally took manuscripts to earn pocket money, and I was also a little famous on the platform. I majored in fine arts in college. As I was painting, I couldn't help thinking of Ethan. He and I don't seem to have taken wedding photos yet. The wedding photos were not good looking because Ethan was frowning. By the time I realized what was happening, the drawing paper in front of me had already sketched out Ethan's appearance. I thought about it, took a photo and sent it to Ethan. "Can I draw a picture for you?" The other party is typing. Message on the other end showed for a long time, but nothing was sent. But until the evening, he didn't reply to this message. He avoided me like this. So I think he still remembered what happened last night. I sent the recording immediately. 16 late at night. Darkness will amplify all senses. There was a very light sound of opening the door, the sound of the shower, and the sound of footsteps coming from far away. The side of the bed sank a little. A slightly cool hand reached over and touched my hair very lightly, as if to confirm whether I was asleep. A familiar scent of shower gel approached little by little. I opened my eyes. Just at this moment, a soft kiss fell on my lips. When our eyes met, Ethan was stunned. I looked at his gradually reddening ears. My mind wandered for a while, and I closed my eyes again, and said sincerely, "Just pretend I'm not awake. Kiss me if you want." There was silence in the darkness. Ethan didn't move. Just when I wanted to open my eyes, a slightly cold hand covered my eyes. I thought he would at least argue with me and deny what happened last night. But he didn't. He leaned down and buried his head weakly in the crook of my neck. The voice sounded muffled and hoarse. And he said, "I'm sorry." My heart softened inexplicably. And I uttered softly, "Why apologize?" He didn't answer, but buried his head deeper. I looked at him, thought about it, and lowered my head to kiss his hair. "Okay. I apologize too. Although I broke up with you, I have only dated you and kissed you for so many years. I ignored all the boys who pursued me. How is it? Do you feel better?" "Ethan, who is he?" "Who?" "The one in the bar." I didn't think twice. He is a male model who dances very well. I only go there once in a long time. Luna drags me there. I will teach her a lesson next time. I have a husband, and will not go to such a place with her again. Really? I nodded. Of course. And I have no feelings for him at all. I saw Ethan's mouth twitched slightly. The next moment, he said again, I'm sorry. During this period of time. I'm even more sorry. I interrupted him and said sincerely. Juan, you don't have to apologize. He couldn't help laughing, buried his head in my neck, and said affectionately, I never blamed you. I just blame myself for not being good enough and not being able to keep you. I didn't know what to say for a moment, so I could only comfort him dryly. No. You're fine. How fine? He became childish. Very, very, very good. I said seriously. The corners of his lips kept widening until his eyes and eyebrows were stained with smiles. Don't hide from me in the future. I touched his hair. He rubbed my cheek affectionately and said softly. 17 My pregnancy reaction came late. But it was fierce. And I couldn't smell any oily smell. I couldn't eat this or that. I vomited 4 or 5 times a day. Ethan specially learned the recipes for pregnant women on the internet for this. He was extremely indulgent to me, and he gave me whatever I said and whatever I wanted. When I was 4 months pregnant, my belly had already bulged significantly. Ethan was even more concerned about me, fearing that I would bump into something. Even when taking a shower, she had to take a shower with me. The bathroom was small, so it was inevitable that something would happen. Ethan, isn't this hard? I asked. He didn't answer. With wet hair and a red face. Just as he was about to turn around, I held him back and said smugly, Forget it. Ethan, I know you want it. Why don't we do that kind of thing? The doctor said no. The doctor only said no in the first 3 months and the last 3 months of pregnancy. His Adam's apple rolled up and down. Still firmly said, no. I shook his hand. Me. 18 since I got pregnant. I seldom go out. Ethan said that I stay at home every day, and never go out for a walk. Which is not good for my health. I just smiled and continued to refuse. He insisted on taking me out for a walk in the evening. I was watching the passing cars all the way. I nodded in a pretentious manner. Yes. The one in my belly is too annoying. Ethan saw that I was absent-minded and asked me if I had any troubles. Ethan laughed, put his arm around my shoulders and kissed me on the forehead. When Luna came to see me, she brought a lot of nutritional supplements. I smiled and took her arm and said, when the baby is born, I will recognize you as my godmother. Luna said disapprovingly, don't do that. I hate children the most. What if it's a very good child? That's annoying too. I hate all children equally. Without exception. Luna emphasized. By the way, I have a good story to tell you. She leaned over and whispered in my ear. Selena had a fight with her husband. And then she moved out and wanted to ask your husband for help. Guess what happened? What? I asked in response to her words. Your husband found out that she was the one who drugged you that day. And there is evidence. Selena's face turned pale. Luna laughed at herself. I slammed the table angrily. I knew it was her. It's hindsight. Luna sneered. Then what happened? Sent to the police station. Luna and I looked at each other. We laughed so hard that our faces were about to break. 19 when I was 10 months pregnant. My belly was already very big. I had learned Lamazi breathing, painless dilation, and contraction timer early on. The delivery bag had already been put in the trunk of the car. So when my water broke in the middle of the night, I didn't panic at all. Ethan's hands were shaking while driving. He said he was a little nervous, a little excited, and a little happy. I just smiled and responded to him once or twice. And most of the time I was quiet and didn't say anything. Ethan thought I was in too much pain and didn't want to talk. So he increased the speed of the car. The night scene of the city passed by the car window. I looked at the vehicles passing by outside, and my heart was always tense. until the car arrived at the hospital safely. I breathed a sigh of relief, touched my belly, and whispered, "Good boy. They allowed your birth." 20 Ethan asked me to discuss the baby's name many times. I always said, "No hurry." As a result, now everyone is surrounding a 4-pound little guy and calling him little baby. Ethan sat next to me, holding my hand and kissing it, with a smile in his eyes. I smiled too. The doctor said I could go home after 5 days. I asked the doctor if I could stay a few more days. Why? It was obvious that I had no reasonable reason, so I just whispered, "Because of some unpredictable things." 21 I have been very clingy these days. And I wish I could stay with Ethan 24 hours a day. It was past 7 o'clock. When the sunset was the most red. Ethan said he would take me out for a walk. There was a jewelry store nearby where I could buy a ring. Although my anxiety reached its peak at this moment, I looked at the smile on his brows and agreed. When I saw the truck roaring towards me, I knew that I couldn't wear the ring. Ethan subconsciously reached out and pushed me. But I knew that I couldn't avoid it no matter what. In the last few seconds of glimpsing death, I looked at Ethan. Tears fell down because of fear, but the corners of my lips showed the biggest and brightest smile. "Thank you, Ethan. I love." The violent impact swallowed my last word. Bang! At the moment of losing consciousness. What I thought was, "What a pity. Ethan. This idiot. He hasn't heard me say, 'light and love' yet." Usually, he was the one who said these sweet words. I just remembered it now. I forgot to tell him that his waist was very huggable, and his mouth was very kissable. And I liked it very much. I forgot to tell him that he was really a very, very good husband and I loved him very much. I forgot to tell him that I really wanted to be with him for the rest of my life and I cherished him very much. He didn't even ask me for a word of love. Ethan never asked me for anything. When we were in love before. And now that we are married. A huge pain swept over me. He will never have the chance to hear it again. Tears and blood gushed out together. "I'm sorry. Ethan. I'm going to leave you again." 20 to my soul rose in the air. I saw blood flowing all over the ground. Against the blood-red sunset. I saw the man holding my body stubbornly. His lips trembling. Whispering my name over and over again. I drifted for several days and saw the lights in the operating room flicker. I saw him hugging my cold body tightly. Crying in a low voice. Repressed and painful. I saw him walking home slowly from the hospital alone. His eyes were unfocused. His face was dull and confused. I also saw him clumsily and attentively preparing milk powder for the baby. The baby seemed to sense his low mood. Even though he had been hungry for so long. He did not cry or make a fuss. But smiled at him while holding the bottle. He also forced a smile. Embarrassed and embarrassed. But the tears on his face fell. My heart suddenly clenched. I reached out to touch him. But found that I could not. I looked at my translucent fingers. Pursed my lips. And slowly retreated. I was not good to him. Without my burden. He can live a good life in the future. He can also find a gentle and considerate wife who is devoted to him. She will take the initiative to kiss him and hug him. Act copathos lie with him. And say a lot of sweet words to him. I rubbed my red eyes and pretended to be relieved. Just as I turned around. He suddenly looked in my direction. His dazed eyes. Hopelessness and collapse were about to overflow with his red eyes. The wind whistled past. The window creaked outward. There was nothing outside. Only the dark and lonely night spreading into the distance. End of the text. Extra Ethan's perspective. Ethan often thought that if he hadn't met Zoe in college, he would probably be overwhelmed by his father's Skyge debt. She broke into his dull life like a bright and beautiful color. It's vulgar to describe it this way. But it's true. So much so that he couldn't forget it for many years afterwards. It made him palpitate. He walked through many seasons alone. But no season was as intimate as the summer of that year. A violent and alcoholic father. A mother who ran away from home. Everyone thought he was aloof. cold and difficult to approach. And no one knew how much he longed for a relationship. It had been too long since he had been hugged. So long that he began to resist and long for it. It was not until she appeared that he had the opportunity to feel the hug. Hand-holding hands. Kissing. Even simple physical contact. Would make him addicted. He knew he had nothing. He even owed her more than 1 million yuan in debt. But he still coveted the warmth of hugging her. The boy took out his pure and sincere heart. But it was useless. She would not care about things that were too easy to get. After the breakup, he switched to finance. He wanted to make a lot of money in the future. So he studied hard. He won many awards and received many hugs on the podium. But every time, he would think of the warm body in his memory. Later, he realized that what he wanted was not a hug, but the girl with a cute smile and occasional bad intentions. That relationship was a few months of inattention on her part, but 5 years of stumbling on his part. He knew how big the gap between them was. But the gods allowed him to have her again in a shameful way, and also gave him a little life. He was overwhelmed by great joy. But he dared not show it at all, because he was afraid that she would abandon him. But his sincere heart will eventually be known to others. She said that she had only had him as a boyfriend. The sincerity of youth finally found a home. Just when he thought that everything was heading towards a happy ending. But fate played a huge joke on him again. The gods took her away in the most tragic way. He only wanted his wife. He could only pray to the gods. He wanted his wife. He knelt down for a long time in countless late nights, begging bitterly. All living things have a home. And he only wants his wife. The gods have many loyal believers, who reward her with thunder and reward, and are concerned about the characters she created. In recent days, her believers have been very restless. The god looked through the comments and sighed. Please, ma'am, don't write Zoe to death. Our Rethan loves her. If I don't see Zoe come back to life for a minute, the whole world will be blown up. Let me go through the book. I'll crash a truck for Zoe. They said Ethan was pitiful and wanted to write Zoe to death. They also said to keep the child and let Zoe revive. The god was very annoyed. But the god did it. Because she needs the incense from the believers. Ethan named his son Neon Juan. The old grandfather who was selling iced drinks at a stall under the old locust tree asked the little guy's name with a smile. The little guy was held in his arms, biting the popsicle, and said in a baby voice, "My name is Neon Juan." Then, he said happily, "My mother's name has the word Juan in it. We all miss her very much." Hearing this, everyone around laughed. Amidst the laughter, Ethan vaguely heard someone say, "So old-fashioned." A very familiar tone. He subconsciously turned his head to look for her. He found nothing. He smiled helplessly. He felt that he must have missed her too much. He was completely insane. Suddenly, someone patted his shoulder. Why give a boy such a name? A familiar complaint came. The smiling face in his memory enlarged in front of him. He had shown the little guy too many photos of her. So much so that when he saw her for the first time, the little guy shouted in surprise, "Mom!" Amid the chirping of cicadas on the old locust tree, he hugged his lover tightly, with hot tears rolling down his face. The protagonist's story ended here, and their story has just begun.